So let me introduce our rabbi, our teacher for the next little while, and then we're going to say the blessing for study together, and then I'll turn it over to her. Rabbi Nikki DeBlosi, PhD, Rabbi Dr. Nikki DeBlosi, connects folks to the breadth and depth of Jewish tradition through inclusive, innovative, and insightful Jewish teaching, speaking, and ritual. A tattooed, polyamorous, queer, suburban, stay-at-home parent, Rabbi Nikki was raised Catholic and converted to Judaism as an adult. She's an avid reader, especially romance, a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and a choral singer. I'm going to invite you to join me in the blessing for study, and then we will jump right into our discussion. Please join me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, which means blessed is the Eternal whose mitzvot make our lives holy and who commands us to immerse, to engage in words of Torah. And I'll turn things over to Rabbi Nikki DeBlosi.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Micah. And thank you to everyone involved in La'asok, to our sponsors for the day, everyone who has ever and who will ever donate to this endeavor. I think it's really important, as someone who came to Judaism from what some might call the margins and who is constantly, it's constantly commented upon. I've never been to a Jewish event, whether I'm presenting or attending, where someone hasn't said, DeBlosi, is that a Jewish name? And I often say it is now, which is my deflect with humor way of responding. But that question, it might be an invitation, at best, an invitation to connect and say, my Jewish identity, I feel insecure about. Or people have always wondered if I belong in Jewish community, right? But it often can read the other way. Right? DeBlosi, is that a Jewish name? Do you even belong here? And I don't want anyone to feel like they don't belong in Jewish community if they're Jewish adjacent, friends with a Jewish person, right? We might have necessary boundaries, like Priya Parker, who wrote the book, The Art of Gathering, might say one of the most important things about a gathering is who you don't invite. So I might have a particular Jewish study event where I would say, if you are, or like, for example, I would have queer Jewish events when I worked at NYU at New York University, and invite college students to my home for Shabbat afternoon Kiddush, right? For a meal and to hang out together. And students, and I might have it be queer themed, and the students would say, if I'm not LGBT or Q, am I allowed to come to this event? And I would say, of course you're allowed to be at the event. The only people who can't come are people who know and are avowed and stubborn about being homophobic or transphobic. Y'all can stay home. Everyone else is invited. And that's how I feel about Jewish text and Jewish study. We all have questions. We all have things that we're afraid to even ask about the text, but our rabbis from the beginning looked at these rich stories, this rich set of stories, this ongoing conversation. And even they said, I feel like there's some gaps here. What's going on? I'm going to keep asking questions about it. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at some texts that are secular and some texts that are sacred. The line between those is maybe up to you and your interpretation. But I want to begin actually with a short video. It's a little conversation between RuPaul, singer, cultural producer, drag queen, and the creator of RuPaul's Drag Race, and Oprah Winfrey, maybe an interesting pair of humans we might not think would talk to each other.
I knew that you were my kind of human when I first heard you say that we're all born naked and the rest is just drag.
Yeah.
Because I have a different way of saying that, but I mean the same thing, that we're all in these kind of body suits, and you come up with these definitions and these ideas about who you really are, but we all are, my favorite quote, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who said, we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I got that as a kid. You know, I was a young kid, and I thought, is everybody getting that this is all kind of an illusion? And I couldn't get anybody to corroborate with me until...
Do you remember the first time you thought that, though?
I remember when my parents were in the living room going crazy, you know, beating each other up. I knew this can't be right. But, you know, when I was about 11 years old on PBS.
Yeah.
I found my tribe in Monty Python's Flying Circus. I thought,
Really?
okay, they get it. Okay, they're irreverent. They're not taking anything seriously,
Right.
and they're having fun. That's what this is all about. So that's when I got it very early. My sisters also, you know, we laughed. That was our sanctuary, was a place where we could, you know, find some peace.
Okay. I'm going to close my. So I just wanted to start with some faces with whom we might be familiar, and this idea that we're born human and the rest is drag. And then Oprah translates it as we are spiritual beings having a human experience. I'd love to see just in the chat, if you want to type in what resonated with you about that conversation. Maybe it was hearing someone say, I finally found my tribe. I like this title of a college paper, Everyone's in drag, but only the queens know. It was all an illusion, right? Monty Python, to connect Monty Python. There's a human experience. That feeling of the whole world is a stage, right? And all the men, women, and humans are merely players on that stage. Yeah, we create this sense for ourselves, right? And when we say all the world is a stage and all the men and women and people are merely players, right? We don't necessarily mean all of this is fake, right? I have a background in something called performance studies, and everyone likes to use the word performative, and pretty much everyone uses it, what I would say incorrectly, because I'm an annoying, snobby academic, but has anyone seen the movie The Muppets Take Manhattan? I promise it's relevant. The Muppets Take Manhattan ends with a wedding scene inside a movie. And it's Kermit and Piggy playing the groom and the bride. And there is a minister on stage. And what does Kermit find out right before the wedding scene is supposed to happen? The minister is not an actor. The minister is actually an ordained minister. So if the minister says the words, and if Piggy and Kermit say the words, then they're actually married, right? The stakes on the stage for us, if our gender and our sexuality and our sex even are performative, are the same stakes for Kermit and Piggy when the minister is not an actor. Everything we do to express our gender or our sex or our sexuality can actually make that true in the world. That's what we mean when we say something is performative. That's what we mean when we do a ritual. Like when I go to get forgiven on Yom Kippur, I don't want to feel like it's all an act. I want to feel at the end like something really happened to me. I was transformed in a way spiritually. That's what's underneath all of this. It's an illusion. It's clothing. We're born naked and the rest is drag. It's really mysterious, and there's something about the human experience underneath. So we are going to take a look. Actually, first, we're going to do some brainstorming about how we all think about gender. So I'm going to give us a board that we can write on together. And I'm going to share it with us. So here, you should see in front of you a blank board, and you can go into it and you can take a little text box. Like if you click on the little T on the left-hand side, and I'm going to write in the middle the word man. And I want everyone to put in this document, maybe you want to draw it, so you can use the little pencil icon on the side, or you can use the text box and write in here any cultural messages, not your personal opinion about what a man is, but the cultural messages you receive about what is man. What are the words associated with man? You can just pop them right into the into that board. Already I see some really amazing things in here. Strong, more than once, lonely, entitled, wise, the permanent self, autonomous self, which is an illusion, privilege, lonely, provider, violence, the image of God, strong, big, responsibility, responsible, masculinity as aggression or violence. Great cultural text on that is a Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode called Beauty and the Beasts. Ambitious, responsible, reliable, protector, provider. Okay, get your last ones out there, and we're gonna grab another conversation. Okay, closed. All right, let me see if I can create us another board. Look at me making a second page. Oh, now guess what we're gonna put on this one? I'm gonna put woman on this one. I don't believe that there are only binary choices, but I love this, Arden, your comment. The born naked quote doesn't mean it's meaningless, just that it isn't preset for you, right? It's not like when the doctor says it's a girl, which I forbade the doctors in the rooms when my children were born from saying it's a boy, it's a girl. I was just like, the first thing my kids are going to hear is me saying the Shehakianu. There's not going to be other words there, but just the blessing for something happening for the first. Oh, is there not another board that you can see to write on? Because I'm silly like that. All right, well, let's see if I can go back to the first page. And I'm going to just, I hate to do this, but I'm going to clear this one. Okay. Do you see it now as an empty page? Yes. Y'all are great. I did click the upper left and then it didn't work, Evan. I didn't practice it enough times before. So now we've got our woman board up. Eve, there she is. She's soft, she's safe. She's so emotional. She's definitely sensitive and gentle, submissive. She's a safety net. She's also Pandora. She's dangerous. She's loving. She could be a birth mother. Right? And this already excludes a lot of people, these two things. She's clean, well-groomed. She's expected to take responsibility for what men do. Secondary gender in the Hebrew language.
I'm trying to type nurturer.
Nurturer. I'll type it in there so we can definitely all see it. Backbitey. This is very bend so that you don't break. Needs to be everything all at once and always is wrong. Oh, I relate to that so much as a parent. Supporter, security, love. I see. Okay, so these are very different, right, from the words that we saw for man and masculine, but we see fierce. That's very interesting. I like this. Ooh, that mama bear situation kind of maybe going on. Okay, I'm going to delete this one again. Oh, empathic, caring. I'm sorry to clear it out because I know that this is really fun. Y'all are really generative. Now, what happens if I said we go back to men, but we say instead Jewish man? What are our associations with a Jewish man? Beard. Orthodox. Nebushi, knowledgeable, wealthy, learned, wearing the tzitzit, the fringes. Ah, there's a uniform. There's something to wear. He's wise. He's funny. Maybe he's an NJB. He's a nice Jewish boy. Maybe he's a little bookish. He's scholarly. He's spiritual. He's wearing a velvet kippah. Somewhat feminine. He has a neurosis. There were in the Middle Ages myths that Jewish men could menstruate. Right? The feminization, right? And now what do you think if it's Jewish women? What's a Jewish woman? What are our associations? She might be quiet. She might also be neurotic. She's fierce. Oh, she's strong. That's interesting. She's direct. She's funny. She has modesty. She has sniss. She dresses or purports herself masculinized by outsiders. Okay. Interesting. Really good at guilt trips. Overbearing. Homemaker. These are really interesting, right? She's the Jewish princess. She's strong, but behind the scenes, she nags people. Okay, she still nurtures children and is a mother. Unattractive to non-Jews. She's shrill. Told to marry a Jewish boy. These are all really beautiful. And here's why I think they're really beautiful. Because a lot of them might apply to some of us. They might apply to some of us. Okay, I'm stopping the share, not because I don't love all the things you're generating. And some of them we might be really angry to see and say that is a stereotype that's actually really hurtful and I'm not into it. But what I like to, the reason I like to start here, right, is to say, number one, when we put up just men and women, we will inevitably be excluding people. There will be people who are say, I actually don't fit into either of those categories. What do I do if I feel more androgynous? I'm searching for something. And then to say, if you are Jewish, somewhere in the culture, either you're by your own definition, like it's really great to be a strong Jewish woman, it's really great to be a scholarly Jewish man, either that sort of self-definition or the outsider making fun of us. A Jewish woman is shrill, Jewish mother jokes, right? A Jewish man is nebushi and he's a mama's boy. We're already told that we do not do our gender correctly as Jews. We're doing it differently than the mainstream, which instead of proving that we're wrong, proves that there can't possibly be just two categories that every single human being fits into. We already don't fit in. Doesn't matter if there's not so many of us, right? We're already showing the lie, right? We're already proving we're all born naked and the rest is drag, everybody. Hate to tell you, but there's nothing inevitable about this. So that's why I like to bring in that part of the conversation to say, we have these working definitions in the world that we are already pushing against just by living as Jewish people, right? Just like we live in a countercultural way if we think at all about Shabbat in a 24/7 world that wants us to constantly be available, right? It's countercultural. So I'm going to ask us to take a look at the two passages from Bereshit, from Genesis. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to ask if we could get two volunteers to read. The texts are in English. And if you want also, if Rabbi, if you could pop, if you have the link with you and you could pop it in to the chat, that would be great for those who prefer to go that way. And then I see Amy raising your hand. Are you volunteering to read for us?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That's
so.
fantastic. So source 2.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
Second. All right then. And God said, let us make a human, Adam, in our image, after our likeness. It shall rule in the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the cattle and the whole earth, and all the creeping things that creep on earth. And God created the human in God's image. In the image of God, God created it. Male and female, God created them. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and master it, and rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the cattle, whole earth, and all the living things that creep on earth.
Okay, we're going to hold our questions for a minute. There's a lot to notice in this passage. Thank you for reading for us so clearly. And Adam, right? That's one of the words that we're going to use. I admit this is my translation. Every translation is an act of interpretation. So you've already been prejudiced by my translation, but we'll look through it together. Now, I want us to listen to the second story. And the questions we're asking are number one, what questions do we have about each of these texts on their own? And then when we look at them together, do these complement each other? Do they contradict each other? And do they each teach us anything about sex or gender? Okay, so is there someone who wants to read for us? This is source 3. I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
I can read for you if no one else volunteers.
Dee, are you raising your hand? Look at you jumping right in. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Amy and Dee, the Nakshonim.
The eternal God said, it is not good for the human, Ha'adam, to be alone. I will make a fitting helper for it. And the eternal God formed from the earth every living thing of the field and every bird of the sky, and brought them to the human to see what it would call them. And whatever it called every living thing, that would be its name. And the human gave names to all the cattle, and to the birds of the sky, and all the wild beasts. But for the human no fitting helper was found. So the eternal God cast a deep sleep upon the human, and while it slept, God took one of its ribs and closed up the flesh at that spot. And the eternal God fashioned the rib that God had taken from the human into a woman, Isha. And God brought her to the human. Then the human said, "This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for from man, Ish, was she taken."
Okay, I'm going to take the share down, but I'm going to also pop the, you have a link to the text, but I'm going to also pop the English from each text. When I try to put the Hebrew in the chat, it always goes cuckoo. So there's the first one, and then I'm going to put the second one in there. And then I want to hear from folks. There might be some clarifying questions like, I'm not sure what that means, or I have a question about the Hebrew. Any clarifying questions, you can pop your hand up there for me. Yes, Toby.
I find it interesting that human was referred to as it, not he or she, until the separation.
So
Until
there's
woman-
me and my little voice right in there. That's my fault / responsibility. I could have translated it as he. What I wanted to give us was there is no neutral in Hebrew. Now, if any of you have, there's a Torah commentary with the 5 books in it that's called the Torah, a Women's Commentary. And it has what they call a gender accurate translation. So when it says every person should honor their father and mother, it doesn't say, it says ish, call ish, every man should honor his father and mother, but it doesn't mean women are exempt. I don't get to say, well, sorry, mom and dad, the Torah said ish and I'm not an ish, right? So that's a place where the Torah, where the translation would say each individual or each person must honor their father and mother, as opposed to kol ish shouldn't cut the side locks of his hair. That was directed at Jewish men. And so the translation will reflect that and say he. So I wanted to give us as blank a translation as I could. So every time, because there are times when this creation story says Adam, and there are times when it says Ish and Isha. And so I wanted to give us no gendered pronouns until the text gave us a really gendered noun, man and woman, right? Anyone know what Adam means? Yes, Toby, go ahead.
I had one other question, one other remark, because God said to Adam, be fruitful and multiply. As best as I know, first of all, it takes 2 beings to be fruitful and multiply. And as best as I can remember, Adam and Eve did not create any new life until after they were thrown out of the garden.
Yeah, that's right. So did they do what they were supposed to do? Susan and Hadassah, thank you, putting in Adam, Adamah, earth. Adam is the creature that's formed from the clay, the red clay, Adom, of the earth. And this question of be fruitful and multiply, how many beings are created in that first story that we read?
1.
I see 1. Can I hear any dissenting opinions?
1, and it was called it.
Bob, what do you think? Were there 1?
Male
What's the
and
third one?
female created he them.
What's going on? Right? We've got this idea of there are different Adams. Okay, and that's I see this down here, Emily, in your response, right? 1 that is 2, says Rabbi Micah. Well, that's not confusing in any way at all. I love that, right? But so we've got already a question of pronouns and number. God said, let us make a human being. Who's us, right? The rabbis ask these same questions. Who is us? What does it mean? Is it 1 or is it 2? In the second story, is it 1 being or is it 2? Check that chat out. 1 then 2. There's what I learned in Catholic school. The rib. Didn't really know that 1 becomes 2 separate. Bob is anticipating our rabbis of the Midrash. Did you read ahead, Bob? I love it. This reading of is it 1, is it 2, right? This is not an uncommon story when it comes to different myths and tales and religious accounts of human creation. Is it 1 or is it 2? Why did God create the first one? Okay, so God is not male or female, or not only male or female. And if Adam is B'Tselem Elohim, is in the image of God, then Adam can't be one or the other, because how could that possibly reflect God's image, right? And then are we thinking about equality and dominance? Can Amy, can you say a little bit more about why equality and dominance come into these two stories?
Definitely can. During first story, you're indicating that everything's balanced. They're created together. No one's higher or lower due to sex, and thus assumed gender. Come to the second one, yeah, right. Women are extracted away from men. Men are higher. Men are holier, since, as our story has it, they helped create women.
So I love the interpretation that you bring, just with the way you deliver your interpretation, your comments vocally, right? There's a real, we have so much culturally layered and historically layered upon these two stories. I've heard feminist jokes sort of, oh, actually, it's not that women are lesser, it's that God didn't get it right the first time, and so God had to create women. Right? That's one way that we can try to repair a story that's been used to say, you know, around 51% of the human population is naturally or ontologically from its creation less than. Do we really think that's what the story says, or that's the only way we could interpret the story? Why did God create a woman in the second story? What's God's motivation? You're the director and you're like, okay, God, here's your motivation, right? Kivyachol, if one could say such a thing. Loneliness, Arden. Can you tell us more about that? Or are you willing to unmute and tell us a little more? The need for diversity. Yeah.
I think there can be only one God, but there can't be only one human.
Right. God just declares.
When God says we, it's the royal we.
So definitely that's the mainstream interpretation of who the we are, is that it's formal, or that it's the angels, right? That it's a non-human presence who's with God. But we know what God is saying is, I might be singular in this whole universe that I'm creating, but lo tov hehiyot ha'adam levado. It's not good for the human being to be singular and alone, right? So I'm going.
I was going to say, it looks like Arden has unmuted. As you
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Arden. Tell us more.
Sorry, I'm on my phone. It took me a minute to find the button. So my background is evolutionary conservation biology. So that was my undergrad, public health master's. Anyway, but from both of those perspectives, humans are a pack animal. We are a social species. Our survival advantages were certainly not like fangs or claws or venom. We have stubby little useless nails and survived by working together. The best and worst of humanity is its socialness, of being able to connect with other people on the one side and tribalism on the other. Before I get too far into the weeds, the point was that humans are social animals. When you are trying to be a pack hunter or do other things in a group, it is good for people to be different and have different strengths and weaknesses and things. Okay.
I love this, right? I love this. I love that you're also, you know, all those folks who are like, but science. And Arden says, and also science agrees with this, right? Differentiation, variety is important, right? One human alone, oh, Tova, I love this. One human alone is not enough to carry the spark of the divine. Right? We actually need billions and billions of human beings, right? This is it, I think it's one of the Baal Shem Tov, right, says the day that you were born was the day God realized the world couldn't be complete without you. God thought, oh, I spent those 6 days, but I needed Beck, and I needed Jerry, and I needed Johnny. Like, I needed each of you, right, to reflect my image in the world. So this is just the beginning of that. Right? Adam, that first, someone talking about their kids like bar, bat, or bet mitzvah is going to make me cry, because I did my 13-year-olds last summer. right? This beautiful idea that we need to be different from each other. And I want to just say one more thing about the word helper. And we're going to move on to the next story just because of the limits in time. We all could unpack the heck out of this story. There are everyone here is an expert in something in addition to Jewish text, and all of you are clearly also very familiar with studying Jewish text, so we could mine a lot from this. But that word, ezer, the helper, ezer kenegdo, the ezer who is, neged means across from or against, right? It could mean I'm against you, or it could just mean opposite of you, like on the other side of the street, right? She's standing across from me. And other associations with the word help, right? Someone earlier in the chat said, not a lesser companion, but a companion who is equal to you, right? To help, who can contribute their talents, right? As we're hunter gathering in the way, right? We're not going to talk about Lilith today, but you're making me want to put that back in. Susan, what's your take?
My take is equal partner. And also evolutionary biology thinking and thinking ahead to Noah. You had to have 2 by 2 in order to continue the process of human development. So assuming the man, the earth cannot create a human child, but 2 humans can, then you have to have 2.
Right. So there's a necessity of procreation. And there's also, someone wrote in the chat, it's always struck me that you need more than 2 people to raise a child, right? That communal necessity, that there are other ways that we might be fruitful and multiply. Right? Be fruitful and multiply. Just, it says there should be a lot of you and you should bear fruit. Does that mean we should create things? Or does that mean we literally must produce biological children from our own gonads and gametes, right? I don't have any children who are biologically mine, but I nurture the next generation, right? There's lots of ways that we can interpret be fruitful and multiply. We've got the idea of an equal partner. For me, ezer kenegdo, for those of you who pray Jewishly, the prayer that you, or the passage that you read in the morning, the person who's raising in a polyamorous household, there's a really funny joke within the polyamorous community that says monogamy in this economy. I need actually 4 incomes to pay all the things that I need. That we have, you all are so amazing. I have to stop looking at the chat because it's too exciting. That we have this notion in that prayer, in the reading in the morning, Elu devarim she'ein lehem shiur, there are things that are limitless, right? That we always must fulfill. You can't say, I honored my parents yesterday, so like I'm set forever. I'm done doing it. It's like, no, you have to do it again, actually. It's like making lunch for your children on a school day. Every school day, you got to do it. And so at the end of that passage, it says, V'talmud Torah keneged kulam. And the study of Torah is as against the rest of them. The image for me there is one of those scales, like the scales of justice, sort of weighted scales, not the digital kind that you stand on and it just gives you a number, but where you put something on one side and you put something on the other side and they move a little and they balance, right? So there's Susan's concept there of an equal partner. I'm balancing my partner out, right? And the balance can change if you've been in a friendship, a parent-child relationship, a collegial relationship, or a romantic relationship with anyone. You might weigh a little more some days and your partner might need to add a little bit to help out, right? It's not exactly the same. And so we could broaden the way we interpret each of the words in this story, right? When it says be fruitful and multiply, we can read like Hadassah is saying. Is it that we're being fruitful and multiplying art, gardening, animals, bearing children, nurturing children, multiplying words of Torah in the world, right? When we read that human beings were created in God's image, both male and female, we can read it the way that my teacher, I'm just going to put her name in here, Rabbi Margaret Mower's Wenning says. That is what is, it's a literary term called a merism. So like when we say from sea to shining sea in the United States, even though some of us might be coastally prejudiced, we actually mean from the sea, everything in between to the other sea, right? Not here and here only. And so Rabbi Wenning is saying women, men, anything also in between if it is a spectrum, right? So we've got this story of Adam and eventually Chava, of Ish and Isha. There are lots of ways we can interpret whether it is about gender and sex and whether it's saying that one of us is inferior or if we are equal helpers. I want to add the Midrash, and if someone wants to read, this is the story that Bob was anticipating already. I see your hand, Susan. Why don't you read for us source 4?
Okay. Rabbi Jeremiah, the son of Elazar, said, when the Holy One, blessed be God, created the first human, Adam, God created it as an androgynos, as it is written, male and female God created them. Rabbi Samuel, the son of Nachman, said, when the Holy One, blessed be he, created the first human being, God created it with 2 faces, then split it and made it 2 backs, a back here and a back there.
I didn't correct that translation. Thank you so much, Susan. Okay, so we've got 2 images. These are 2 rabbis who are like, all right, I've read the text. I see that there was one story where there was a simultaneous creation. And then there was this other story about putting the one to sleep and the rib and the building another one. So we've got 2 images. What is let's start actually with the second one, Rabbi Samuel. How does Rabbi Samuel picture this first human being, Adam Harishon, the first Adam? And if there's someone who hasn't spoken already, I'd love to hear. What do you picture this one as? I should have asked us all to have Plato with us. Susan, how do we picture this human?
Plato are good images. It's sort of like tohu vavohu, that there is an essence of something that needs to be separated in order to become 2 humans.
So there's something, and Plato, you're spot on, and we can see a hint of that even in the previous story. Anyone familiar with Hedwig and the Angry Inch, the musical? Oh, I see some hands up. You can go watch it later. There's grown-up words in it, so if you have, you should just watch like an adult. This is a picture from that play. You've got this creature who is one creature, right? 2-faced, back to back. The picture here, and in Plato's version, there are male, 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 female, and female, male versions of this creature, of this first creature. And it's like it's either Zeus or the Titans. I can't remember where in the Greek creation myth it starts, but punishes us humans by splitting us into 2. And our other half, this is where the idea of like our other half comes from. We spend our whole life trying to find our other half. This is an image that human beings are incomplete, right? And that it was a punishment from the gods to split us into 2, and then we had to find each other. But Rabbi Shmuel's story is actually a little bit different from that. What's different about Shmuel's version of this? God first created Adam, 2 beings, and then 1 being, and then split it in 2. Amy, yeah.
His understanding is that humankind was originally created as intersex. And then we went and were split into our binary divisions. And obviously some of that can go on to this day, since, as somebody taught me, yeah, right, 1 person out of 50 is born intersex, whether that is or isn't visible at birth.
Yeah, and that, the statistics on the incidence of intersex variation in human beings is really contended right now. Like, people are, as you can imagine, especially in my lovely country, really trying to use science to silence and erase people. But the fact is that there is variation, right? A human being can be born and someone can say, oh, I'm not going to declare one side or the other of the binary, right? This person has characteristics that mix, or you don't know until the person is older, right? You don't know until puberty, right? And these are ways. I just want to acknowledge that this is a community of people who have been abused and traumatized, in particular by the medical industry. And we can read more about it. If you haven't read the book Inverse Cowgirl, it is an amazing account of an intersex woman who's also a really strong activist. But I want to ask Dee, what did you notice here in Shmuel's story?
Yeah, and in Rabbi Shmuel's story, it's just so impractical. Like, how does this being move, right? I mean, I'm thinking of the push me pull you from where was it, Dr. Doolittle, right? It can't go anywhere. Just to drush on that, so it can't go anywhere, and so you need to split it into the diversity of voices to actually achieve some progress. Just a thought.
Right. So God is not punishing us by dividing us into two, right? God is like, look at this unruly being over here. Like, how are they going to get anything done? I had a student, an Episcopalian student, who said one of the most beautiful things about this midrash, and I teach it at weddings a lot, which is when God split those beings into two, right? We could have run around and run away from each other, which is kind of the image in the Plato story. They ran away from each other, and then they have to spend the whole rest of their lives finding each other. And instead she said, oh, God did that so that we had an invitation to turn around and relate to each other. Right? So this is an image saying God created the first human being with differences and then split some of those differences out so that they could turn to each other and say, oh, you're different. Right? Interesting, because what's the first thing that Adam says, or Ish says about Isha, is actually, this one's like me. Adam doesn't say, oh, look at this weird different thing. That's like, there's actually a midrash that the rabbis say that Adam tried to have sex with each of the other non-human animals. It was like, this is not going to work. And then God then gets Eve and is like, oh, this is so beautiful. That's what the story says in the Torah, right? Adam has a moment, or Ish has a moment of recognition, right? We're not lonely, Beck. This is the person who's your beshert, right? There's someone out there who's gonna compliment you, right? Who's gonna be your helper across from you, right? And then I want to also bring in Susan and then Rabbi Micah. I want you, for folks to be thinking, now what's the other story that Jeremiah is giving us? But Susan, why don't you go ahead?
Well, this is not related to the story, but I recently watched a Netflix series called The Conclave, and I think that was the title, in which the Pope dies and the College of Cardinals get together, and through a process of multiple votes, they elect somebody who's apparently a relatively unknown. And right at the end, he sits down with, I believe, Stanley Tucci, and he says, I was born with a uterus. And he's already been named Pope. And here he is confessing or stating his true self. It was really, I just sort of went, whoa.
Yeah, and I think it's really complex. I as an ex-Catholic watching, I was just like, if this actually happened, that would be amazing. And also, I wonder about what an intersex person like feels about being sort of the solution to the problem of gender discrimination in the whole Catholic Church. Like, that's also a burden to have on a person. But what these traditions are saying, and what this midrash is saying, is the story of creation already gave us something that was beyond categorization. A human being who is one human being, who is Zachar and Nekeva, whatever we think Zachar and Nekeva mean. We're going to look in a second at some words for that. And also differentiation and the ability to connect and complement one another. Rabbi.
Yeah, along with what you're saying, I was also noticing how the story, the midrash that you just brought, is also quite heteronormative at the same time, right? The Plato version that you're referencing
Yeah.
has there's a male version and a male female and a female version. Here you essentially have the one man, one woman, they get split apart, therefore, they need to be married. So it's interesting how the text presents us both with sort of what is outside of that heteronormative, a being that doesn't fit into that, but also can be read to be sort of like the archetype of heteronormative marriage.
And that depends on how we read it. Now, number one, as someone who's writing a book about polyamory in Judaism, nobody stands under a chuppah or signs a ketubah in the Torah, right? He took her and he lay with her and she became his wife. And the word for wife is woman, and the word for husband is master. There's a lot of politics in all of that, right? Wow, so much to unpack. But it says, here is the reason why, at the part that I didn't give us in the text is, here is why a person abandons or leaves his father and mother and joins with a wife, and they become as one flesh. To me, that's less an explanation about a heterosexual marriage, right? Because to me, like I have a friend who says that God created him and his wife Zachar and Nekeva. Zachar is usually translated as male and Nekeva female. And he says, but I'm Nekeva and she's Zachar. Because he's the one who's like stays home with the kids and cooks, right? And he jokes and says, well, yeah, we complement each other, just not the way you would expect. But to me, it's an origin story for something that my kids pointed out to me, which is my oldest son said that when he was younger, he was going to marry his little sibling. And I was like, oh, why? And he said, well, because like I already know them and they laugh at all my jokes. Great reason to marry someone. You know them really well. They think you're hilarious. And I said, actually, we don't marry someone who's related to us by family like that. That's just not something that human beings do. And he was like 3. And he said, you marry a stranger? To me, that's part of the origin story. You are born into a family and maybe into a clan, but you can go make an alliance and create a life with someone that you didn't know at all before. And you get to cling to that person. You get to cling to that person and create what you're creating. So, I mean, the challenge with these texts is how far can we stretch them before the text would look unrecognizable? So some might say, it says Zachar and Nekeva, it means male and female. You can't interpret this in a way that includes LG or B people. Or you can be like me and say, well, I'm already expanding the way I'm reading Zachar and Nekeva. Right. And I'm saying what this is giving us is, why do we cling to each other at all? Why do we create these new alliances and units with people that were legit? They were strangers before. It's just like, you know what? Yeah, your mom was a stranger to me. I was a stranger to her when yeah. So, okay, I want to actually take a look at source 6, and I'm skipping over the beautiful gender unicorn because and I'm just going to show us a few words that our rabbis had for words that are beyond a sort of binary, right? 2 and only 2 choices for sex or gender. Now, we are using these words sex and gender. Sex usually is argued to be the thing that is immutable, unchangeable, and very clear and very binary. But we've already heard, as Amy said, it's not true. It's not binary. It isn't clear. And also, it changes over the course of our lives. Even me, who I'm a cisgender woman, so my gender assigned at birth is the same gender that I've always identified with and pretty much always been interpreted as, except often told that I'm not ladylike enough. I do not have the same sex hormones, right, related to femininity or masculinity in my body now than I did when I was a baby, than I did when I was 11 and first getting my period, right? And now as a middle-aged woman who's going into perimenopause. Am I a different kind of woman than I was before? Am I not a woman anymore? I never gave birth to a child. Does that mean I don't have a feminine experience or a woman's experience, right? There's lots of ways in which we each fit and don't fit the categories, and the rabbis knew it. So the rabbis we have the word zachar, which we might read as masculine, derived from the word for pointy sword, right? Sometimes a cigar isn't just a cigar. And the word nekeva for crevice or opening. A thing I love about the word nekeva in particular is that in one of the prayers that we say every day, at least once in the morning, and usually every time you use the bathroom, it says that the human being, Adam was created b'chokhmah, with wisdom, nikavim, nikavim, chalulim, chalulim, with all these different openings and passageways, right? Our eyes, our noses, our mouths, right? Our ears, we take things in from the world, right? So everyone, no matter our sex assigned at birth or the sex that shows somehow in our bodies, has crevices and openings, right? Every human being has erectile tissue in our reproductive organs. They might not look or be the same as the person next to us. And then we see hundreds of references. These are references in Mishnah, Midrash, Talmud, everything sort of pre Shulchan Aruch, I think, is where Rabbi Elliot Kukla, one of the first openly trans folks to be ordained by a mainstream rabbinical school in like the 80s, I think he was ordained, not long enough ago, counted how many times these words show up in classical literature. So we see the androgynous, a person who is, we're going to read a lot about the androgynous, who is neither male nor female, or maybe is both in some ways, the tumtum, the elonit, and the saris. And those three we might more closely associate with various intersex variations in human beings. So you know, the rabbis don't have the same exact, like they can't x-ray people and like see what if the reproductive organs they have are testicles or ovaries, but they know that there are some people who might be assigned one way at birth, and then as they reach puberty show signs of the quote unquote opposite. Now the rabbis get assigned to the tumtum and the elonit and the saris like a very clear position in society on that line of male or female. And as we're going to see, the androgynous becomes a little bit different and is classified a little bit differently. Okay. So there are people who are claiming these terms, right? People in the trans, intersex, genderqueer communities, even Rabbi Kukla and his colleague, Rabbi Reuben Zalman, they have their own translation of the Mishnah that we're going to look at in a minute. And when they read this text, Rabbi Kukla said, oh, the Talmud, the rabbis, they know about me. I exist to them. That's so cool, right? That I exist. So we're going to take a look, unless folks have questions that they want to clarify before we move on, we're going to take a look at how the rabbis respond to the knowledge that they've acknowledged that there are more than two sexes. Okay. Yeah, people didn't necessarily, well, the Saris Adam, right, is someone who's a eunuch by human intervention, right? So and very interestingly, right, these are kind of, these folks are maybe some of the heroes of the book of Esther, because the only way Esther gets to communicate with Mordecai after she's in the palace is through the Sarisim, the people who can move between binary spaces, men's spaces and women's spaces, and can carry messages back and forth. That notion of being kind of invisible, that might be painful, also gives an advantage, right? So, okay, so we're going to look at this text about the androgynous. There is some argument about whether this is actually a text as early as the rest of the Mishnah or if it was added later. But what we're talking about, actually, let me just stop for a second. What we're talking about here is a text that's the Mishnah is trying to take laws and derive them from the Torah. So it's in a section on bikurim, on first offerings, that men are supposed to give. Men are supposed to give these offerings. And so their question is like, what are we going to do about if there's different ways that men and women behave in Jewish custom and law? What will someone who is an androgynous do in different instances of behavior? Okay, so the person's existence is not in question, right? No one is saying trans people, genderqueer people, intersex people, however we want to identify or glom onto what we think the androgynous means in modern terms. No one's saying, oh, that person doesn't exist. That's not real. There's men and there's women, right? But the rabbis are saying, okay, but we have this system where when you wake up in the morning, what you do is a little bit controlled by how old you are, and also by if you're a man or a woman. So if there's someone who's willing to read for us this text about the androgynous, it's kind of long, and then we'll go through it together. Amy, why don't you go ahead? Thank you.
Definitely can. You're welcome. An androgynous is similar to men in some ways and to women in others, in some to both men and in others to neither. In what ways is he like men? He causes impurity with white discharges like men. He
I
dresses
should have
like...
warned you, there's bodily fluids involved in this one.
You're right. May they not prove traumatic to anybody.
That's rough, yeah.
No problem at all. He can take a wife, but not be taken as a wife, like men. He may not be secluded with women, like men. He sins if he transgresses the laws. You shall not cut your side locks, Leviticus 19:2, like men. He must perform all the commandments of the Torah, like men. And in what ways is he like women? He causes impurity with red discharge, like women, and he must not be secluded with men, like women. And he does not share in the inheritance with his sons, like women, and he is disqualified from being a witness, like women. In what ways is he like both men and women? One who strikes him or curses him is liable, as in the case of men and women. One who unwittingly kills him must go into exile, and if on purpose, then the slayer receives the death penalty, as in the case of men and women. And in what is he different from both men and women? One doesn't burn teruma if it came into contact with his discharge. Neither is he liable for entering the temple while impure, unlike men or women. Rabbi Meir says, an androgynous is a created being of their own. The sages could not decide if they are a man or a woman.
Okay, so there's a lot here that is giving commentary or telling us what our ancestors, our rabbinic ancestors, who were mostly cisgender straight men, what they thought, not just about an androgynous and their place in Jewish society behaviorally, but also what they thought about men and women. So I'm going to stop the share for a second, and I'm going to put the text in here. I haven't been able to look at the chat yet, but I'm sure that a lot of us have a lot of feelings about the things that are in this text. And so the opening line is basically very typical of the Midrash, which is like, how many rules am I going to tell you? Here are the rules, right? They're saying there's different ways that an androgynous is going to get basically classified under Jewish law. Sometimes they're going to be like men, sometimes like women, sometimes like both, and sometimes like neither. Throughout the thing, they're going to use the word hu, which means in Hebrew he, to refer to the androgynous in the singular. So we've already got a linguistic problem, right? We're going to talk about an androgynous, but we don't actually have a pronoun to talk about them. So that's why it's translated the way that it is here, right? To just show that there are some problems that the rabbis also forgot to solve. Funniest parts of the Mishnah are the rabbis on how women's bodies work. Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite. Oh, it's not letting me paste it because I see that it is too many things in one. Yeah, so we've got a lot of assumptions. What do we? Well, I'm going to let you all react. We have like 10 minutes. Do you think it's fun, easy, difficult to be an androgynous under this system? What's your life like?
So something I wrote in the chat is that they can't be confined with men nor with women. Something that I noticed when I read this a couple of weeks ago, actually. What a lonely life. Like, they're literally excluded from society.
So they're excluded from one-on-one behavior in particular context, right? This is the notion of yichud. Here is where we understand that we are not the first culture that has conflated sex, gender, and orientation. The rabbis are like, look, if you look like a man and you have a penis, your gender is masculine, man, and you are desirous of women, every woman apparently, because you can't be alone with each other because, you know, it might lead to mixed dancing, right? So you've, and I know I'm saying this in a sarcastic way. I obviously have my own opinions about mechitza, about divisions between men and women. I respect people's choice to be in these gender binary places, but I ultimately believe that is morally bankrupt to only have those two choices, and that we're not treating people like whole human beings, right? So you could be alone with another androgynous, I think, because neither of you is a man or a woman, right? You can marry a woman, so you could count as the husband, right, in a marriage, right? The woman, the wife in a Jewish marriage, it's always described in the passive voice, like grammatically, thanks to the nuns who taught me English. She is married, he marries her, right? And so the androgynous gets to be the active partner, and yet he can't count as a trusted witness, right, in a legal case. He is wearing clothing that make him, so like there are others who say androgynous puts on tzitzit, puts on a fringed four-cornered garment, but he doesn't say the bracha, he doesn't say the blessing, because he's not really a man, he's neither a man nor a woman. Imagine being in a community where you put the tzitzit on and you didn't say the blessing, and your friend is like, what, you don't know the bracha? Like, say the bracha, right? Or you're studying in the study hall with a bunch of people who are presenting as men, male, and then your friend says, come over for a beer, and you say, I can't because I'm not allowed to be alone with you. Is anyone else going to be home? Right? There's this ambiguity. There's only, you're like one or the other in each space. So someone said this person's life is contextual, right? You count as a man in this space, as a woman in the other space. You're a human being. If somebody murders you, thankfully the Torah says, yes, it is. If someone murders an androgynous, they murdered a human. These people are human. Okay, thanks. Sort of bare minimum that you can give me is that I'm a person, right? It's really confusing, right? Mayor saying when you can't partake in communion, everyone can see that you're not going up to get communion, right? And the assumptions about you, well, this person doesn't fit in. Toby, I see your hand up.
Yes, it's disturbing that you are not more than you are. There are more things that you are not and not accepted. And it's got to be worse than a lonely existence unless you find another person who is just like you, because you're neither fish nor fowl. You're the expression half-breed, you know, the Indian and the white man. The society didn't, neither society accepted these children. They were just not.
I love the way that I love the example of fish nor fowl, because what is fish under Jewish law?
Parv.
Fish is parv. Parv means neither meat nor milk. So the rabbis actually do know how to create a category that we can cope with behaviorally, and there isn't a value judgment about whether a vegetable is parv or whether a fish is parv, right? Now, what my issue is with this particular text, right, about the androgynous, first reading it with Elliot Kukla's, with Rabbi Kukla's interpretation, saying, oh, I get to get married. Nobody says I have to be alone. The rabbis say I can marry someone. I'm part of Jewish life. Then I read it with a trans non-binary person, my chavruta. We've written, Bons Swencionis, we've written together about non-binary and trans inclusion in Jewish spaces. And their response was, okay, I exist, but like, you could make it easier for me, actually. Right? You don't have to give me the most restrictive of each category, right? Because what are those categories about that the rabbis are saying? Those categories about purity and impurity, those are about our relationship to God, and that the danger of the human relationship with God, right? Like when there was a temple, if you went into the temple, if the high priest went into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur and the sacrifice of the people was not accepted, what happened to the high priest? He could die. Line between life and death is really precarious. So the rabbis are thinking a lot about that line, right? Between, they could be lenient about rabbinic rules rather. So this is the concept of derabanan versus d'oraita. Derabanan means Jewish laws that are derived from rabbinic rulings versus d'oraita, meaning from the spoken, like the oral Torah, Jewish law that is derived directly from the Torah. Well, God also said to us in Leviticus, I gave you these rules that you should live by them. And the rabbis say that you shouldn't die by them. These categories, Evan, these do a lot of excluding, right? If we look as a Jewish community, and this is my soapbox, right? And say, yes, there are people who exceed binary categories in the world, and our ancestors loved to categorize things. They love to make lists and categorize things. And they made this list, and I think they made a mistake here, right? In making this list of ways that the androgynous has to behave, right? And not thinking about, and thinking about it like law by law, instead of thinking about it life by life. What is this person's life like from birth to death? And from dawn until dusk, right? Making lists is awesome. And can we make lists that are bigger, right? Like if you have the idea that the rabbis, like the beginning of the Talmud, Me'imatai Korin et Shema ba'arvim, from what time do they recite the evening Shema prayer? The rabbis are basically saying, it's really difficult to know, when is it day and when is it night? It's not like the cartoons where you walk outside and the sun just gets lifted up in the morning and then it gets switched out for the moon, right? Like the backdrop on a stage. There's twilight and it gets darker, but like, is it dark enough? There's all this in between. They spend 88 pages of Talmud plus the commentary saying, when is it evening? When does it start being evening and when does it stop being evening? When do you start being male or masculine and when do you start being female or feminine? And why and how will that matter in our communities, right? I think we get to decide behaviorally what our custom is going to be. What is our minhag going to be? How are we going to live to say that we're each created b'tselem Elohim in God's image? That the first human being was an androgynous. My kid is non-binary. They're like 10 years old. And we first read that midrash before, said, oh, that was me. The first human being was non-binary like me. And that to me is a gift that you get to give as a Jewish person to a non-binary, a trans, a genderqueer, a queer person, to say, the rabbis so long ago said the first human being created in God's image couldn't be one or the other. That's too small for God. That has to be too small for humans as well. So these are mine and others, the other, queer folks whose shoulders I stand on and am shoulder to shoulder with at protests and all those things. If you want to read more queer interpretations, like, am I a Twilight person? Love this. Or I'm a Twilight person with leanings, one or the other. There are some really great texts in this book called, I'm going to actually take it off my shelf. Hold on. It's like a supplement to the prayer book that's called Mishkan Ga'ava, Where Pride Dwells. A lot of the texts in here are designed to be ritual and prayer moments for those of us who don't often see our lives and realities reflected in Jewish text, right? All of these things, all of these words that we have about God in whose image we're created are metaphors. They're all metaphors. It just so happens that our so-called traditional prayer book metaphors are like king and sovereign and father, right? But if you look at all of our texts, there are a lot more. Isaiah says, God says, I cry out like a woman in labor. That's pretty unambiguous of a metaphor that isn't a masculine God, right? I'm like a mama bear. I'm an eagle, right? God is like an eagle. All of the nicknames and words that we have for God, right, exceed this idea of our Father, our King, right? Not that Father and King can't resonate with us, but they don't have to be the only ones that resonate. So I hope that this has been helpful and useful to y'all. I learned a lot from you. You're a really awesome generative group of people. And I think, Rabbi, if you could, you put your amazing support last. So please notice the connection. There's the link there to take more classes and to donate. And if you could pop in that other link, if you have a minute to, I'm going to be teaching some classes during Pride Month. And I'm a freelance rabbi, so I usually ask folks to make a donation to participate. So I've got one that's the same as this, and then 2 opportunities for a session that's called Why Queer Inclusion Matters. And it's going to be especially for those folks in your lives who want to be an ally and aren't really sure where to start.